You are sentenced to life in prison.
I never thought my own sister would be the one to destroy my life. But that's exactly what happened. And the worst part? She did it with a smile on her face right there in that courtroom while I sat in handcuffs watching my entire world crumble. My name doesn't matter anymore after what happened. I became just another number in the system. But my sister, her name was Sarah. Beautiful, charming Sarah, who everyone always said was the smart one, the successful one. The one who'd make something of herself. I should probably start at the beginning, though that's harder than you might think when your beginning and ending got so twisted together that you can barely tell where one starts and the other begins. It was March 15th, 2023, when everything started falling apart. I remember the date because it was supposed to be a good day. I'd just gotten promoted to senior accountant at Henderson and Associates, and Sarah had invited me out to celebrate. We met at Romano's, this little Italian place we'd been going to since we were kids. Sarah looked different that night. There was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. She seemed nervous, fidgety, constantly checking her phone. When I asked her about it, she just laughed it off and said work had been stressful. "You know how it is, Lisa," she said, twirling her pasta around her fork. "The law firm's been crazy busy. We've got this huge case coming up and everyone's on edge." I nodded, understanding. Sarah had always been the ambitious one. While I'd chosen the steady, predictable path of accounting, she'd thrown herself into criminal defense law with a passion that sometimes scared me. She worked 60, 70-hour weeks, barely had time for a personal life, but she loved it. "Speaking of work," she said, reaching into her purse, "I need you to do me a favor." She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table to me. Inside were financial documents, bank statements, investment records, tax forms, all with my name on them, but wrong. The numbers were wrong, the dates were wrong, some of the accounts I'd never even seen before. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through the papers. "It's for the case I mentioned. We need someone to review these financial records, make sure everything adds up. The client specifically requested someone outside our firm, someone trustworthy." She smiled, that Sarah smile, the one that had been getting her what she wanted since we were kids. "I immediately thought of you. I should have asked more questions. I should have looked closer at those documents. But Sarah was my sister, and when family asks for help, you help. That's what we'd always been taught." "Of course," I said, tucking the envelope into my bag. "When do you need them back?" "No rush, just whenever you get a chance." We finished dinner, talked about Mom and Dad, about Sarah's latest dating disaster, about my promotion. Normal sister stuff. The kind of conversation I'd replay in my head 1,000 times later, looking for signs I'd missed, warnings I'd ignored. The next morning, I was at my desk going through the documents when something caught my attention. One of the bank statements showed a large deposit, $50,000 made on a date when I knew for certain I'd been out of town at a conference. I called the bank, thinking there might be some mistake. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the representative said, "but I can't discuss account details over the phone without proper verification. You'll need to come in with identification." That afternoon, I drove to the bank during my lunch break. The manager, a woman named Mrs. Chen, who I'd worked with before, looked confused when I showed her the statement. "This is definitely your account, Ms. Rodriguez," she said, pointing to the account number. "And this deposit was made in cash at our downtown branch." But I was in Phoenix that whole week for a conference. "I have the hotel receipts, the plane tickets." Mrs. Chen frowned, pulling up something on her computer. "The deposit was made by someone who presented proper identification and knew your social security number and mother's maiden name." My blood went cold. There were only a handful of people who knew all that information about me, and Sarah was one of them. I spent the rest of that day going through the documents more carefully, and what I found made my stomach turn. The records painted a picture of financial crimes. I'd never committed money laundering, tax evasion, embezzlement. but they were sophisticated, detailed, and they all pointed to me. That night, I called Sarah. "Hey, about those documents you gave me," I started. "Oh, did you find something interesting?" Her voice sounded different over the phone, more careful. "Sarah, these aren't just client documents, are they? Someone's using my information to create fake financial records." There was a long pause. "Lisa, you're probably just misunderstanding something. Financial records can be complicated. I'm an accountant, Sarah. I know how to read financial records. Someone has been moving money through accounts with my name on them, and I think someone's trying to frame me for something." Another pause. "That's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're reading everything correctly?" "I'm sure. And what's worse, whoever did this would have needed access to my personal information. My social, my mother's maiden name, details about my life that only family would know." "Lisa," Sarah's voice got very quiet. "You're scaring me. You're starting to sound paranoid." "Paranoid? Sarah, there's $50,000 deposited in an account under my name on a day when I was in another state. That's not paranoia, that's fraud. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist or something. This kind of thinking, it's not healthy." I hung up, my hands shaking. My own sister was gaslighting me, trying to make me think I was losing my mind. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew what it meant. The next morning, I decided to take the documents to the police. I figured if someone was using my identity to commit crimes, I needed to get ahead of it, establish that I was the victim, not the perpetrator. Detective Morrison was a tired-looking man in his 50s who listened to my story with the kind of patience that comes from hearing crazy things all day long. He looked through the documents I'd brought, making notes on a legal pad. "These are pretty sophisticated," he said finally. "If someone's setting you up, they've done their homework. What should I do?" "Well, first, we'll need to verify these documents are real. Then we'll need to figure out who had access to your personal information." He looked up at me. "You said your sister gave these to you?" "She said they were for a client, that she needed me to review them." Detective Morrison nodded slowly. "And your sister's a lawyer? Criminal defense, yes. Ms. Rodriguez, I have to ask. Is there any reason your sister might want to hurt you? Any conflicts between you two?" I thought about it. Sarah and I had always been close, but there had been tensions. She'd always been jealous of my relationship with our parents, claiming they loved me more because I was the good daughter who stayed close to home. There was also the incident with David. David had been Sarah's boyfriend in college, but he'd broken up with her to date me. It was messy and painful, and even though it had been years ago, I sometimes caught Sarah looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read when David's name came up. There might be some old resentments, I admitted. Detective Morrison made another note. "We'll look into this. In the meantime, I'd suggest you be very careful. If someone is setting you up, they might not be done." He was right to be worried. 3 days later, FBI agents showed up at my office. Lisa Rodriguez. Lead agent, a woman named Agent Carter, showed me her badge. "We need you to come with us for questioning in connection with a money laundering investigation." My coworkers stared as I was escorted out of the building. I could hear the whispers starting before we even reached the elevator. At the federal building, they put me in a small, gray room and left me alone for what felt like hours. When Agent Carter finally came back, she had a thick file with her. "Ms. Rodriguez, we've been investigating a money laundering operation for the past 8 months. Over $2 million has been moved through a network of accounts, all leading back to you." She opened the file and spread out documents, bank statements, wire transfer records, photographs of me at ATMs I didn't remember visiting. It was like looking at evidence from someone else's life. "I've never seen most of these accounts before," I said. "Someone's been using my identity." "That's what we thought at first, but then we found this." She slid a photograph across the table. It showed me at a bank, clearly depositing a large envelope. I remembered that day I'd been depositing my paycheck and some cash I'd been saving for a vacation, but in the context of everything else, it looked suspicious. Ms. Rodriguez, we have security footage of you making deposits into these accounts. We have records showing you opened them. We have your signature on documents, your identification used for verification. None of that's possible. Someone's been impersonating me with your exact fingerprints. She slid another document across the table. It was a fingerprint analysis comparing prints taken from documents I'd supposedly signed with my official prints on file. They matched perfectly. I stared at the report, my mind racing. How was this possible? How could someone forge fingerprints? I want a lawyer, I said. That's your right. But Ms. Rodriguez, I have to tell you, the evidence against you is overwhelming. If you cooperate with us now, if you tell us about your associates in this operation, we might be able to work out some kind of deal. I don't have any associates because I didn't do this, Agent Carter sighed. We'll contact a public defender for you, but I'd think very carefully about your position. Money laundering at this level carries a sentence of up to 20 years in federal prison. They arrested me that afternoon. As they were reading me my rights, all I could think about was calling Sarah. She'd know what to do, she'd help me figure this out. But when I asked to make my phone call, the officer informed me that my sister had already been contacted. She said to tell you she'd handle everything, he said. That gave me hope. Sarah was a criminal defense attorney. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. But Sarah didn't come to see me that night. Or the next day. When she finally showed up at the county jail, it was with news that made my blood run cold. Lisa, I've been looking at your case, she said, sitting across from me in the visiting room. The evidence, it's really bad. But you believe me, right? You know I didn't do this. Sarah looked away. Lisa, I've seen the financial records. I've seen the security footage. It's overwhelming. Sarah, look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. Do you really think I'm capable of this? I think people can surprise you. I think desperation can make people do things they never thought they'd do. What desperation? I just got promoted. I'm doing fine financially. Are you? Because according to these records, you've been struggling. Your credit cards are maxed out. You took a second mortgage on your house last year. I stared at her. How do you know about my credit cards? Lisa, it's all part of the investigation. Nothing's private anymore. Something in her tone made me uneasy. Sarah, are you representing me or not? I can't. There's a conflict of interest. What conflict? She stood up. I'll help you find a good attorney, someone who specializes in financial crimes. Sarah, wait. But she was already walking away. The attorney she found for me was a man named James Patterson, a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. When we met, he spread out the prosecution's evidence on the table between us and shook his head. This is about as airtight as cases get, he said. Financial records, security footage, witness testimony, fingerprint evidence. They've got you making deposits, opening accounts, moving money around. The pattern is clear and consistent. But I didn't do any of it. Then someone went to extraordinary lengths to frame you. And I mean extraordinary. We're talking about forged fingerprints, manufactured security footage, false documents dating back months. That level of sophistication would require resources, expertise, and access to your personal information that most people simply don't have. What about my sister? She's the one who brought me those first documents. Patterson looked through his notes. Sarah Rodriguez. She's actually going to be a witness for the prosecution. What? According to their witness list, she'll be testifying about your financial situation, your behavior leading up to the arrest, conversations you had with her about money problems. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She can't do that. Attorney-client privilege. You weren't her client, and she's not bound by any privilege regarding conversations you had as siblings. The trial started 3 months later. I'd been in county jail the entire time, unable to make bail on such serious federal charges. Every day, I tried to figure out how this had happened, who could have done this to me, why my own sister seemed to believe I was guilty. The prosecution painted a picture of a desperate woman who'd used her accounting skills to set up an elaborate money laundering scheme. They showed security footage of me at banks, played recordings of phone calls where I allegedly discussed moving money, though I couldn't remember making any of those calls, and presented financial documents with my signature and fingerprints. Their star witness was Sarah. She walked into that courtroom wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a professional bun, looking every inch the successful attorney. When she was sworn in, she didn't look at me once. "Ms. Rodriguez," the prosecutor began, "what is your relationship to the defendant?" "She's my sister." "And in the months leading up to her arrest, did you notice any changes in her behavior?" Sarah nodded. "She seemed stressed about money. She mentioned several times that she was having trouble making ends meet, that her expenses were higher than her income." I wanted to scream. I'd never said anything like that to her. "Did she ever discuss any plans to make extra money?" "She said she was looking into investment opportunities. She asked me about offshore accounts, about how to move money without it being traced. It was a lie, a complete fabricated lie, but she said it with such conviction, such apparent reluctance, that I could see the jury believing her. Ms. Rodriguez, I know this must be difficult, testifying against your own sister." Sarah's voice broke slightly. "It is, but I took an oath as an officer of the court. I have to tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts." She was good, really good. She played the role of the grieving sister who'd been forced to turn in her own family member perfectly. By the time she finished her testimony, I could see the sympathy in the jury's eyes, not for me, but for her. Patterson's cross-examination was weak. He tried to suggest that Sarah might have motives for lying, but without any concrete evidence of a conspiracy, it just sounded like desperate accusations. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, "isn't it true that you and your sister have had conflicts in the past? All siblings have disagreements, but that doesn't change what she told me. Didn't she steal your boyfriend in college?" Sarah looked hurt. "David chose Lisa. I was heartbroken at the time, but that was years ago. I've moved on, and you've never resented her for that. I love my sister. That's why this is so hard for me." I watched her performance from the defendant's table, and for the first time I started to see the truth. This wasn't just a case of someone framing me, this was personal. This was Sarah, my own sister, systematically destroying my life. But I still couldn't prove it. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they came back with a guilty verdict on all counts, I felt something inside me break. As the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, I looked across the courtroom at Sarah. She was crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a sister devastated by her family members' crimes. That was 18 months ago. Spent every day since then in federal prison, sharing a cell with a woman named Maria who's serving time for drug trafficking. She's the one who finally helped me understand what really happened. "Your sister's a lawyer, right?" Maria said one night after I'd told her my story for probably the 100th time. "Yeah, criminal defense." "So she knows how investigations work. She knows what evidence prosecutors look for, how they build cases. So she didn't just frame you. She built a case against you the same way she'd build a case for a client. She knew exactly what evidence to create, how to make it look authentic, how to cover her tracks." Maria was right. Sarah had used her legal expertise to construct the perfect frame job. She'd known that forged documents wouldn't be enough. She'd needed video evidence, witness testimony, a clear motive. So she'd created all of it. The security footage had probably been deep-faked. The technology exists, and Sarah would have known how to find someone who could do it. The fingerprints could have been lifted from things I'd touched and transferred to documents. The witness testimony was just her own lies, told convincingly enough to persuade a jury. But knowing how she'd done it and proving it were two different things. Been working on that for months now, using the prison's law library, filing appeals, trying to find any crack in the case Sarah built against me. And slowly, very slowly, I've been finding things. There was a security camera across the street from one of the banks where I was supposedly filmed making a deposit. The timestamp on the prosecution's video showed I was there at 2:47 p.m., but the camera across the street showed no one matching my description at that time. One of the accounts I supposedly opened required a utility bill as proof of address, but the bill they used was dated 3 days before it was actually issued. Small things. Tiny inconsistencies that might not be enough to overturn a conviction, but enough to raise questions. And then, 2 weeks ago, something happened that changed everything. I got a letter from our mother. Mom and Dad had cut off all contact with me after the conviction. They couldn't believe their daughter was capable of such crimes, and Sarah had convinced them that maintaining a relationship with me would only cause more pain for the family. But in her letter, Mom wrote something that made my hands shake. "Lisa, I know you probably hate us for abandoning you, but Sarah showed us evidence that we couldn't ignore. She had recordings of phone calls where you talked about the money laundering, photographs of you with the people you were working with. She played them for us right after your arrest, and we were so shocked we didn't know what to think. Recordings that were never introduced at trial. Photographs that were never submitted as evidence. Why would Sarah show evidence to our parents but not use it in court? The answer was obvious because it didn't exist, or because it was so obviously fabricated that it wouldn't hold up to legal scrutiny. She'd only needed to convince our parents, not a federal prosecutor. I wrote back to Mom immediately, asking her to describe exactly what Sarah had shown them. Her response came yesterday. There was a recording of you talking to someone named Marcus about moving money through offshore accounts. Sarah said the FBI had wiretapped your phone, and there were pictures of you meeting with this Marcus person at various locations around the city. I've never known anyone named Marcus, but the fact that Sarah had created fake evidence to convince our parents meant she was willing to fabricate evidence, which meant she'd probably fabricated the evidence used against me in court, too. I'm writing this all down because I think I finally know how to prove Sarah framed me. But I also know it's going to be dangerous. Sarah's put a lot of effort into destroying my life, and she's not going to let me expose her without a fight. I've been in contact with a private investigator named Tom Bradley who specializes in overturning wrongful convictions. He's agreed to look into my case, specifically focusing on the technical aspects of the evidence, the security footage, the document analysis, the financial records. If your sister really did set this up, he told me during our last phone call, she would have had to leave traces. Nobody can create a deception this elaborate without making mistakes. He's right, and I think I know where she made her biggest mistake. The timing. All of the evidence against me, the bank deposits, the account openings, the wire transfers happened over a specific 8-month period. But I've been going through my calendar from that time, cross-referencing my activities with the crimes I supposedly committed. On the day I allegedly opened the first fraudulent account, I was in deposition. For a case at my accounting firm. There are records, witnesses, security footage. On the day of the largest cash deposit, I was donating blood at the Red Cross. They keep detailed records of donor visits, small things, but enough to establish that I couldn't have been in 2 places at once. Sarah was smart, but she wasn't perfect. She'd created evidence of my guilt without checking to make sure I didn't have alibis for some of the key dates, and now I'm going to use that against her. Tom Bradley is meeting with the bank's security footage next week to have it analyzed by experts who specialize in detecting deepfake videos. He's also hired a forensic accountant to go through the financial records and look for inconsistencies. But the most important thing he's doing is investigating Sarah herself. If she framed you, he said, she had a motive, and she had access to resources most people don't have. We need to figure out both. I think I know what the motive was. It wasn't just about David or about childhood jealousy, though those might have been factors. I think Sarah needed someone to take the fall for crimes she was actually committing. Think about it, she's a criminal defense attorney with access to information about money laundering investigations. She'd know how to move money without being detected, and she'd know how to set up someone else to take the blame when the authorities got too close. I think Sarah was the real money launderer. And when the FBI started closing in, she decided to sacrifice her own sister to save herself. It's a theory that makes sense of everything, why the evidence was so sophisticated, why she was so quick to believe I was guilty, why she was willing to testify against me in court. But proving it is going to take more than theories and inconsistencies in security footage. Yesterday, I got a call from Tom Bradley with news that changed everything. "Lisa, you need to sit down for this," he said. "We found something." He'd been looking into Sarah's financial records, not easy to get, but private investigators have ways of accessing information that regular people don't. What he found was a series of payments to a company called Digital Solutions LLC, a firm that specializes in creating synthetic media, deepfake videos, forged documents, artificial audio recordings. She paid them $40,000 over 3 months, Tom said, right around the time the evidence against you was being created. That's enough to overturn the conviction, right? It's a start, but we need more. We need to prove the evidence used against you was actually created by this company. How do we do that? We need to get them to cooperate, which means we need to offer them something in return. Tom explained that Digital Solutions LLC was operating in a legal gray area. What they did wasn't technically illegal. They created synthetic media for movie studios, advertising companies, legitimate clients. But they also took jobs from people who wanted to use their technology for fraud. If we can convince them to admit they created fake evidence of your crimes, we can not only overturn your conviction but potentially charge your sister with perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. What do they want in return? Immunity from prosecution. They're scared that if this comes out, they'll be charged as accessories to fraud. It took 2 weeks to work out the details, but eventually, Digital Solutions LLC agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. What they told us was even worse than I'd imagined. Sarah hadn't just paid them to create a few pieces of fake evidence. She'd hired them to construct an entire false reality around my supposed crimes. Fake security footage from multiple banks, synthetic audio recordings of phone calls I'd never made, even fabricated fingerprint evidence created using prints she'd lifted from glasses and documents I'd touched. She was very specific about what she wanted, the company's owner told Tom. She provided us with details about her sister's appearance, voice patterns, behavioral habits. She wanted the synthetic media to be as realistic as possible. How long did this project take? About 4 months. She was very patient, very methodical. She'd review each piece of evidence we created and send it back for revisions if it wasn't perfect. 4 months. Sarah had spent 4 months systematically creating a false case against me while pretending to be my loving, supportive sister. But the most shocking revelation came when Tom asked about payment. She didn't pay us directly, the owner said. The money came from accounts that were part of the money laundering operation the FBI was investigating. She was using the proceeds from actual crimes to pay for framing her sister for those same crimes. Sarah hadn't just been defending money launderers. She'd been one of them, and when the investigation got too close to her, she decided to destroy me to save herself. Armed with this new evidence, Tom Bradley filed a motion for a new trial. The federal prosecutor who had convicted me, Agent Carter, was not happy about it. "This is highly unusual," she said during the hearing. "The defense is asking us to believe that a criminal defense attorney with an impeccable reputation systematically framed her own sister using sophisticated technology." "That's exactly what we're asking you to believe," Tom replied, "because that's exactly what happened. The judge, a woman named Judge Williams who had a reputation for being thorough and fair, reviewed all the evidence we'd gathered. The inconsistencies in the security footage, the payments to Digital Solutions, LLC, the testimony from the company about creating fake evidence. "This is certainly compelling," she said finally. "But it raises a serious question. If Ms. Sarah Rodriguez was capable of orchestrating such an elaborate deception, how do we know she isn't doing the same thing now to frame her sister?" It was a fair point. Sarah was smart enough to create fake evidence of my guilt. She might be smart enough to create fake evidence of her own guilt. But Tom had thought of that. "Your Honor, we'd like to request that the court subpoena Ms. Sarah Rodriguez's financial records for the past 2 years, as well as her communications with Digital Solutions, LLC. If she's innocent, those records will exonerate her. If she's guilty, they'll confirm everything we've alleged." Judge Williams agreed to the subpoena, which meant Sarah was about to find out that her carefully constructed lie was falling apart. She requested an emergency hearing, claiming that the subpoena was harassment and that she was being targeted because of her testimony against me. She looked different when she appeared in court, thinner, more nervous, constantly checking her phone. "Your Honor," she said, "this is clearly a desperate attempt by my sister to avoid responsibility for her crimes. She's making wild accusations without any proof." "Ms. Rodriguez," Judge Williams said, "we have testimony from Digital Solutions, LLC stating that you paid them to create synthetic evidence. How do you respond to that?" "I've never heard of that company. If they claim I paid them, they're lying." "Then you won't object to us examining your financial records?" Sarah hesitated. I have concerns about privacy." "Ms. Rodriguez, you're a criminal defense attorney. You know that privacy concerns don't override the court's need to investigate potential perjury and evidence tampering." That's when Sarah made her first real mistake. Instead of continuing to deny everything, she tried to get ahead of the evidence. "Your Honor, I may have hired some people to help me investigate my sister's case. I was trying to understand how she'd committed these crimes, so I could help the prosecutors build their case." "You hired a company that specializes in creating fake videos to help you investigate your sister. I may have made some poor choices in my desire to see justice served." Judge Williams stared at her. "Ms. Rodriguez, are you admitting that you created false evidence in your sister's case?" "I'm saying that I may have used unconventional methods to uncover the truth." It was over. Sarah had basically confessed to everything, thinking she could spin it as an overzealous attempt to help the prosecution. But what she'd actually done was admit to perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The next few hours were a blur. The prosecutors moved to dismiss all charges against me. Sarah was arrested right there in the courtroom. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, pure, undiluted hatred. "You always had to be the victim, didn't you, Lisa?" she said as they walked her past my table. "Poor little Lisa, everybody's favorite." Even then, in her moment of ultimate defeat, she was trying to make it about her pain, her jealousy, her resentment. But I was free. After 18 months in federal prison, I walked out of that courthouse a free woman. The media was waiting. Of course, the story of a sister framing her own sibling for money laundering had captured national attention. But I didn't want to talk to reporters. I just wanted to go home. Except home wasn't really home anymore. My house had been seized as part of the investigation, sold to cover the legal costs of my defense. My job was gone, obviously. My relationships with friends and family were shattered. Sarah had destroyed more than just my freedom, she destroyed my entire life. The hardest part was facing our parents. Mom and Dad had believed Sarah's lies completely. They'd cut me off, refused to visit me in prison, mourned their daughter as if I'd died. When the truth came out, they were devastated not just by what Sarah had done, but by their own betrayal of me. "How could we have believed her?" Mom asked. Through tears when I finally agreed to see them. "How could we have doubted you?" Because she's a very good liar, I said, and because she knew exactly how to manipulate you. Dad looked older, grayer, like the revelation had aged him years in a matter of weeks. We should have stood by you. We should have trusted you. You believed the evidence you were shown. Anyone would have, but forgiveness is complicated. I understood why they'd believed Sarah. She'd shown them fabricated evidence that seemed convincing. But I also couldn't forget the 18 months I'd spent in prison, thinking my own parents had abandoned me. We're working on rebuilding our relationship, but it's slow. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. Sarah's trial was a media circus. The prosecution painted her as a master manipulator who had used her legal expertise to destroy her own sister's life. Her defense team tried to argue that she'd suffered from a mental breakdown, that jealousy and resentment had driven her to acts she never would have committed in her right mind. I testified against her, just as she had testified against me. But unlike her performance, my testimony was the truth. Why do you think she did this? The prosecutor asked me. I think she was stealing money from her clients, using her position as their attorney to move funds illegally. When the FBI investigation got too close, she needed someone to take the blame. And she chose me because she knew she could manipulate the evidence, and because... I paused, looking across the courtroom at Sarah, who was staring at me with cold hatred. Because she's always resented me. This was her chance to destroy me and save herself at the same time. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital Solutions LLC had kept detailed records of everything they'd created for Sarah. Financial records showed the payments she'd made using money from the laundering operation. Phone records showed communications between Sarah and various co-conspirators in the money laundering scheme. Sarah Rodriguez, the brilliant criminal defense attorney, was revealed to be a criminal herself. She'd been stealing from clients, laundering money for organized crime figures, and using her knowledge of the legal system to cover her tracks. The jury convicted her on all counts: money laundering, perjury, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in federal prison. Ms. Rodriguez, Judge Williams said during sentencing, you have violated every principle of the legal profession. You have betrayed your clients, your family, and the justice system itself. Your actions represent the worst kind of corruption, the abuse of knowledge and position for personal gain. Sarah showed no emotion as the sentence was read. She'd maintained her innocence throughout the trial, claiming she was being framed just as she'd claimed I was guilty. Even faced with overwhelming evidence, she couldn't admit what she'd done. As they led her away to begin her sentence, she looked at me one last time. "This isn't over," she said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. But it was over. The nightmare that had consumed 2 years of my life was finally finished. Rebuilding has been harder than I expected. The federal government apologized for my wrongful conviction and provided some compensation. But money can't give you back the time you've lost or repair the damage to your reputation and relationships. I've been working with other victims of wrongful convictions, helping them navigate the legal system and the emotional trauma of being imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit. It's given me a sense of purpose, a way to turn my experience into something positive. I've also been working with law enforcement agencies to help them identify sophisticated evidence fabrication. The technology Sarah used is becoming more common, and prosecutors need to know what to look for. Tom Bradley, the private investigator who helped prove my innocence, has become a good friend. He's working on a book about the case, and he's asked me to co-author it with him. We want people to understand how easy it is for someone with the right knowledge and resources to fabricate convincing evidence. Your sister wasn't the first person to do this, he told me recently. And she won't be the last. As technology advances, it's going to become easier for people to create fake evidence. The legal system needs to adapt. Right. Sarah was ahead of the curve, but others will follow. Courts need better ways to authenticate evidence, especially digital evidence. Prosecutors need to be more skeptical of cases that seem too perfect, too neat. As for me, I'm learning to live with what happened. Some days are harder than others. I still have nightmares about prison, about the trial, about the moment when the jury read that guilty verdict. I still feel a flash of panic when I see police cars, even though I know I'm innocent. But I'm alive, I'm free, and I know the truth. Sarah tried to destroy me, but she failed. She destroyed herself instead. I think about her sometimes, sitting in her federal prison cell, probably planning appeals and legal maneuvers, still convinced that she's the victim in all this. Part of me feels sorry for her, the sister I grew up with, the one who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework, must still exist somewhere inside the woman who tried to destroy my life. But mostly I feel grateful that the truth came out. Grateful for people like Tom Bradley who believed in my innocence when no one else would. Grateful for the chance to rebuild, to start over, to use my experience to help others. 3 weeks ago, I got a letter from a woman in Texas whose husband had been convicted of embezzlement based on what she believed was fabricated financial evidence. She'd read about my case and wanted my help. "I know he didn't do this," she wrote. "But the evidence looks so real, so convincing. Everyone believes he's guilty, even his own lawyer. I don't know what to do." I wrote her back, sharing what I'd learned about evidence fabrication and connecting her with resources that might help. I don't know if her husband is innocent or guilty. I can't know that based on a letter. But I know what it's like to be trapped in a system that believes fabricated evidence. And I know how important it is to have someone who believes you when everyone else has given up. That's what I'm doing now, being the person I needed when I was sitting in that federal prison, convicted of crimes I never committed, abandoned by everyone I loved. I'm being the voice that says, maybe the evidence isn't what it seems, and maybe we should look deeper. It's not the life I planned. Before Sarah destroyed everything, I was a successful accountant with a stable career and a quiet, predictable existence. I never wanted to be an advocate for criminal justice reform or an expert on evidence fabrication. But maybe this is better. Maybe using my experience to help others is more meaningful than the life I had before. I still miss my old life sometimes. I miss the innocence of believing that the justice system works, that family would never betray you, that truth always wins out. But I've learned that life is more complicated than that, and that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones capable of hurting you the worst. Sarah taught me that lesson in the cruelest way possible. But she also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was, that I can survive things I never imagined surviving, and that even when everything seems lost, there's always hope. The last time I saw Sarah was during her sentencing. As they led her away, she looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what she'd done. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret, or sadness, or fear. But then it was gone, replaced by that cold hardness that had carried her through months of lies and manipulation. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. She'll be eligible for parole in about 25 years, assuming she serves her full sentence. By then, we'll both be old women, our lives defined by this terrible chapter that consumed everything we once were. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never agreed to review those financial documents she gave me at Romano's that night. If I'd asked more questions, been more suspicious, refused to help, but I know that's useless thinking. Sarah was already committed to her plan by then. If it hadn't been those documents, it would have been something else. She needed a fall guy for her crimes, and she'd chosen me long before that dinner. The hardest part is accepting that the sister I loved never really existed. The Sarah who comforted me when I was scared, who celebrated my successes and supported me through failures, who I trusted with my deepest secrets, that person was always capable of this betrayal. The seeds of what she did to me were always there, hidden behind the facade of sisterly love. But maybe that's not entirely true. Maybe people change. Maybe the sister I knew was real at one time, before greed and jealousy and desperation twisted her into someone capable of destroying her own family. I'll never know for sure, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's enough to know that I survived, that I found the truth, that I'm free. Yesterday, I got another letter from someone who needs help proving their innocence. And tomorrow, I'll start working on their case, using everything Sarah taught me about deception and manipulation and evidence fabrication to help expose the truth. It's ironic, really. Sarah tried to destroy me, but instead she gave me the knowledge and experience I need to help others who have been wrongfully convicted. She made me an expert in exactly the kind of crimes she committed. In trying to bury me, she created the person who would ultimately expose her, and maybe that's justice in its own strange way. Not the clean, simple justice of movies and television shows, but the complicated, messy, imperfect justice of real life. I'm free. Sarah is in prison. The truth is known. It's not the ending either of us planned, but it's the ending we both deserved. The truth, as it turns out, is more powerful than any lie, no matter how carefully constructed, no matter how convincing it appears. Sarah learned that the hard way. And now, finally, after 2 years of nightmare and struggle and pain, I can say with certainty, it's over. The sister who tried to destroy me failed. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. And I'm using everything she taught me about deception to help expose the truth. In the end, maybe that's the best revenge of all.